Okay, so explain your technical skills and
Sure.
what are things you covered in your overall experience and what is your current project and role and responsibility.
Sure. Thank you for asking. So my name is Amarjeet Kumar. I am having 7+ years of experience. Currently, I'm working for the Java development. So the technology which I use, like Java, Spring Boot microservice, Spring Cloud Component as a backend, and some of the exposures in front end as Angular 9. Also, I have a good experience in the AWS cloud services. So most of the cloud services I use for the deployment and development for the applications. And coming for the database, I used Mongo and Oracle. Mongo as NoSQLs and Oracle SQLs for relational database. And some of the DevOps tools I used like Apache Maven, Jenkins, Jira, GitHub, ELK, Splunks and all, which used for the development, monitoring the applications or developing other applications while we are developing any microservices based applications. These all are the technical skills which I have experience. Coming for the domain, I have a good experience in banking, telecom, e-commerce, and health insurance. So currently I'm working based on the health insurance domain. So that is based on the project which we can manage the customers. If any customers want to look any type of insurance for this different modules, then they can try to initiate the orders. Once the orders will be processed, then internally we'll have a multiple business logic need to be performed through the microservices. So that will be multiple microservices which will be completing the details from one to another interactions. So once order will be processed, then we need to check the particular store. Based on the store, we need to define the payment calculations. Once payment will be calculated, then we have a rebate application. So like is there any promo applications of customer is applicable, so that promo code
Okay,
will be
so
discounted
sorry for
like.
interrupt, but functionality perspective understood.
Mhm.
A little bit on a technical side. What is your architecture? What is your design patterns you use? So those things
Sure.
and yeah, so go there.
Yeah, so after that, like while we are developing the application, so my role and responsibility here, like developing microservices. So the architect technology, same I told, like Java with a Spring Boot microservices. So on daily basis, mostly I'm developing API. So while we are developing API from communicates from one microservice to another microservices, we'll have a API development as asynchronous. So asynchronous, I used Kafka where we can migrate multiple microservices which communicated from one. So we need to create a clusters of Kafka. Then we have a creator, producer, consumer. Apart from this, while developing applications, so that will be deployments and all. So once deployment will go for this productions, we need to stay on call there. We have to check all the configuration, security, and all the logs. One and what are the input parameter will pass and what are the expectation things will be there that we have to cross check while before deploying the productions. So here for the security implementations we use JWT token log for this static logs and all. We have used SLF4J and also we need have a multiple exceptions and validations we have handle in the project. And coming for the testings, we used Java in unit JUnit and Mockito for the testings. And we deployed these applications on cloud based. So the cloud based, while we are creating applications, we create a Docker image, and then based on the containerization, we need to deploy this application in AWS. So AWS most of the services I use like easy to instance, Elastic Beanstalk, S3 bucket, and uh, CloudWatch, SNS, SMS I used mostly. So these all are the used. Yeah.
Okay, so deployment, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, development, you are doing the API development.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come out it later.
Yeah.
Uh, but you are telling that microservice.
Yeah.
So is what is basically microservice design or microservice architecture, that how services are flowing, what are the failure mechanism? Go a
Okay.
little deeper in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. So microservices mostly we use a Spring Cloud component while we develop a microservice. Microservice is nothing but is a portal like which insurance portal. We have divided into multiple categories like insurance, payment, and rebate, promo, notifications and all. So while we are developing any type of microservices, in that we used like a cloud component. Like cloud component will have a, like once the request will come from the UI, either it may be the Angular and all, so that will be go for the API gateway. So that API gateway will have a Joule, so that Joule will redirect to the particular request. So that is request from coming from the client, and where I have to send particular which microservice related this request is there, that will go for the Eureka service registry. So where we used Eureka service registry, there will register all the microservices with the proper naming conventions and port. So according to that, once the request will come from the API gateway, either Joule or any others, through that a registry will come in this, and then they will redirect to the others microservices, respective microservices. Once the microservices will be there, maybe some of the microservices need to be communicated one to another. Here we have a implementations, either will have a handle multiple requests simultaneously and all. For that we need to maintain load balancers while we are developing applications, so that Ribbon's load balancers we implemented. Coming for this, like while microservices have multiple microservices and they are not proper handling or maybe not giving proper response and all, so maybe some of the microservices will have a down or something happen. In that cases we need to handle the circuit breaker. So that circuit breaker will have a heuristic circuit breaker that need to be handled in the business logic while we are developing. And uh, yeah, so in the microservices, we used multiple design patterns also, like CQRS, Saga, API gateway, which I already told as a Joule. Saga, we handle those transactions while we have a multiple database connections with a particular microservices, or maybe multiple microservices which need to be communicated. There will have a database. So that database which we need to maintain the transactions. While we have managed the transactions, then maybe how we can sure like our transaction is consistent, like if any other microservices is not responding, or maybe that transaction has not failed, not updated in there properly, then how we can roll back our all the respective microservices transactions. So how final commit will be rolled back, or final commit will have a commit or partial commit. So for that we'll have a Saga pattern which need to be managed. If you will use the Saga orchestration, according to that we will manage. Apart from this, others, uh, 12 factors also we used while we are developing. So we can create a config server. So while we have a multiple YAML file with a multiple microservices, so instead of used in the all microservices YAML, instead we can create a Spring Cloud config server. There all the YAML file we have to place, and while we need to frequent changes, things will be there that we have to update it there. So we have enable auto refresh all will be there. So through that we can refresh all the service config server, so automatically that changes will be redirected to the all the respective microservice.
So you are following a config first approach or discovery first? Which one?
Config first.
Config first. So in case of config server, you are doing any changes over there.
Yeah,
So how it going to pick the updated data from there?
yeah, so while we are writing a config server, there will have application.yaml there also. So there we can mention as a refresh, auto refresh will be there. So once if you are modified any YAML file, so that will be refreshed and redirected to the respective microservices, because all microservices will use this config server detail in application YAML.
Auto refresh at where?
In config server.
Okay.
So that depends on the requirement. We can use either discovery or maybe config server.
Basically, this one is not depend on requirement. This one is the initial architecture what you are following. You are saying that config first approach, and
Hmm.
in telling that you are doing the refreshment over there, because in config first approach,
Hmm.
the config server need to start first and then only discovery and all come in picture.
Correct, yeah.
Anything for log tracing purpose?
Log tracing purpose we use Splunk or ELK I use, depends on the different microservices. So some of the microservices we configure Splunk. So while we configure Splunk, then after that we can trace the applications based on the database query form, or maybe based on the
Wait.
timestamp.
So, Splunk is nothing but picking the data from there, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So, how you are storing the data over there?
Okay. So
You,
how? Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, so suppose if a microservices are there, in a microservices we need to add the dependency for the Splunk in pom.xml. After that, the Splunk features which will be came, and Splunk's
no,
detail.
my point is Splunk. What is the database over there?
Uh,
Where it the reading the day records.
yeah, yeah. So in a Splunk will be by default database is there. Uh, Manually we will not configure a Splunk database. Automatically that will be there in by default.
By default is there, but in such scenario, if you will do the restart
Mhm.
or doing the restart, then what happens? Then all data going to be wiped out.
Restart and all. Okay. In UI Splunk where we have options. No.
Elasticsearch also you are using, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So for that we'll have a by default database will be there, but that will not be if you are doing restart, mean that data will be not deleted. Not be deleted, I think.
You were telling that default database you are using.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are restarting, definitely it will reset everything, na? Which database is?
Okay. Not sure. I'll check.
Because you are just adding a dependency of Splunk, correct?
Yeah.
Which version of Spring Boot you are using?
3.x I used.
3.x. Okay. So you were somewhere updated.
Yeah.
Uh, you are managing pooling and all this stuff,
Pooling in terms of thread or maybe.
connection pooling.
Yeah, database connections I used.
So what pooling mechanism?
Thread pool.
Thread pool is different. DB connection pooling is little different. Thread
Yeah, yeah.
pooling is different. Thread pooling is somewhere when you are trying to execute a, multiple particular process with a multiple thread.
Correct.
So for that purpose, we are using thread pooling.
No, while we connected with the database, in that we'll have a Mongo. Suppose depends on the SQL. Suppose we have a Mongo, then we need to use a Mongo template and then create a connections. Create
Okay, Mongo template I understood. And
yeah.
what about Oracle? Oracle also you mentioned.
Oracle, yeah,
So if let's say you need to connect with Oracle, then
Oracle will have a JDBC ODBC driver so that we'll have a SQL connector.
yeah. So what thing you are using for that? You are telling that pooling mechanism you are using, correct?
Hmm.
So which pooling mechanism? Hikari have you ever used?
Hikari, yeah, that also I used, but not much. Hikari pool, yeah.
What is Hikari pool?
Hikari pool is used for like suppose if you have a if you want to migrate it with multiple database or maybe some different database from one to another database, then Hikari pool is a connections through that you
No,
can migrate,
no,
I
no,
think.
no, no. DPCP, C3P0, listen these words.
Yeah, I listen, but right now I'm not sure.
Okay, leave this. What about caching?
Hmm. Guessing
For caching purpose, anything you used?
Redis caches I implemented before. Redis caches I used.
Okay. What is benefit and when it is beneficial to use the Redis cache?
Like if client or maybe client is searching any type of request or any data from the particular server. So on the client side we'll have a caches will be stored. So once he will try to access again for the particular simultaneously time. In that cases, instead of direct calling to the database or fetch the applications, so that load and all will be handled. So instead of that, we'll have a store the cache. So based on cache details, that data will be gone through the particular customer. So uh, like fetching time and all will be very less.
You use the word client side cache. Is this is the client side cache?
No, no, that will be have a on server while we are deploying creating an application. But while users will access any applications, then that caches will be generated. So that caches while customer is accessing any our application, so in that time there will be some client side caches also will be generated for the particular customer on browser level, so that they can get if 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 he want to hit again, then again automatically that will be came out through the server to client.
And if I need to change the data, then
Yeah, if you will be change the data, then again that will request will go for the particular microservices, and then new caches will be generated on the server level.
so how it will understand that data is changed?
Data is changed because while the request is generating there, that if same data will be there, then cache ID will be generated based on the cache ID. If you have modified any changes, so that cache ID will be generated with the new unique other ID, I think.
How cache ID is generated?
Cache ID generated, yeah, there is a one algorithm is there while we introduce Redis caches. So that uh, is in config Redis cache config file dot java there. We need to add routing
Okay, leave that part. We are having few keys to manage the cache, and in such situation, either we need to delete the data or we need to do the restart kind of activity. Okay, so little bit you use the cache, correct?
yeah.
EH cache, have you ever listened the word EH cache?
Not it.
Okay, Hibernate, JPA, anything
Yeah,
used?
JPA I used. Hibernate also I use, but right now I'm in familiar with JPA.
Okay. If let's say you need to call any procedure and function because you worked in a banking and multiple domains, so mostly they are very database driven approaches they are having.
Correct.
So if you need to call any procedure or function, how you will call at Java layer?
Okay. So procedure and functions. So that will be called by the repository layer. So while the request is coming from controller to service, so business logic will fetch the detail from the repository. So in that repository, instead of query calling, we need to write some query parameters. So based on this, JPA will have a multiple default method is there through that we can call. So instead of that, we need to access the procedures. So whatever the stored procedures we have written, that we need to call through this call through the repository layer. Hmm.
Okay, go a little deeper. You know what is basic difference between a statement, prepare statement, callable statement?
Yeah, a statement which is used to fetch the database. Sorry, details. Prepare a statement like always. This statement will be generated once the new request will come, and callable statement will call for this while we used store procedure functions and all. In that time, we can call use the callable statement. So
Statement and prepare statement
uh,
come again for
a
us.
statement is used like once the request you are once uh, once you are trying to get the connection for the database, then you can create a statement, and prepare a statement always that will be fixed, and prepare a statement always will be generated with the new request. Suppose if new request is coming for the particular uh,
No,
database
no,
connection.
check it later on. Check it later on.
Hmm.
Okay.
Statement and
You talk about the thread pooling, correct? Any executor framework you are familiar?
Thread pooling executive framework. Mostly I use the thread life cycle and deadlock situations and synchronization, asynchronization.
These are a concept you are
Constant
saying, that
concept,
deadlock
yeah. Uh-huh,
situation, and these are. I didn't want to relation those basic things. It
uh-huh.
was a college level
Correct,
task,
yeah.
okay. But I'm
So,
asking that any executor framework you are familiar. Now we have a fancy way to manage the thread pools. Which Java version you are using?
7, 8 used.
Spring Boot you are using.
Uh,
Then I hope so. A minimum to minimum 8.
yeah, so
Because Spring Boot 3.x is not going to support the Java
correct.
1.7.
The 1.87
Correct.
is not supporting. Right now I'm using 8, but we are familiar with Java 7 and 8. I told like,
What is new feature came in a Java 1.7?
Java 1.7 will have new features like try with resource. I think one features which came, and other is uh, 8 we have a multiple features came in there instead of Java, but 7 we have 2 3 features which was introduced. One is try with resource we can use.
Yeah, try with resources are correct.
And others is
Okay.
without a static method.
No.
A static method we can call. Mm, Java 7. That's
Okay, no worry. In AWS side, you use that anywhere you get opportunity to work with Lambda.
Lambda. Mm, yeah, I seen, but actually I'm not familiar. But other services I used, Lambda I seen in my
Okay,
project
okay,
as
leave
well.
it, leave it. SQS SNS you use,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Where
yeah,
and what purpose?
yeah. While we worked on the insurance portal, so once users is taking any type of insurance and all, then that details we need to capture, and after that we will send the notification to the customer, like you have successfully taken this type of insurance. Your next premium date will be there on that date. So like that. So SNS I use notifications purpose mostly.
And what about SQS?
SQS is used for this like if you have a bulk of users which need to be send the details either email or maybe some SMS and all that, then we can create a queue. So that queue based on this queue uh, the data will be send it by synchronized way.
Synchronized way.
Not sorry, it's a synchronized way, because synchronizations will have only one at a time, only one data will be generated.
So how this SQS is working?
Mm-hmm,
Because you are telling that with async it is working. Let's say I'm going to post the data and multiple people are there
mm-hmm.
who are accessing it. So in such scenario, how it manage the data, whatever is pasted in a queue?
Okay.
And what was the failure mechanism? If something get failed, then how it handle?
Mm-hmm. Uh, Once something that failed, then
Okay, leave that part. Come up at a Java layer. Can we override a main method?
No, main method we can't override because main method is a part of a static, so static data can't be override in the non-static. If you have a static data, a static method will be there. There we can maybe override.
So are you sure that we're not able to do that?
We can do, but in non-static, we need to create a object, and then based on that reference, we can do. Or and if you have a static data or a static method, there we can override the main method.
Sorry, static data and static method then.
S- Mm, like in a static method.
I'm accepting that point that we cannot do the overriding for main. That is okay.
mm,
But what is the logic for that?
while we override, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to override, then the method should be other method should be a static. Then we can override that.
Other methods should be static, then we can override. Are you sure? What is overriding concept?
Overriding, like we'll have a one class to another class. We'll have a same method and same signatures. Then only we can override. So that will be on runtime. Overriding in all.
Okay. So you are telling that if another class is also having a static method, then we can do that.
Yeah, I think if we have
But
another
no,
class,
check the
let
concept.
it be
It's not. Static methods are associated with a class.
class level. Yeah.
Correct?
Mm,
Correct. Okay. Different question. Let's say we are having a class A. Okay.
mhm, mhm,
Class A is having a variable A is equal to 10. Okay.
mhm, mhm,
We are having a variable A is equal to 10 and it have a void display method. Okay. The display method is not static. Okay. Normal method.
mhm.
And we are just printing the value of A.
Okay.
We have another class B and we are doing the overriding of above method.
Mhm,
Class B is standing somewhere A and doing the overriding activity. So in such scenario, okay, in class B, we are having a another variable named A itself.
mhm.
Okay. And we are doing that its value as a 20.
Okay.
Okay. So what happened is that variable overrided or not? The value will get changed or not? If I'm going to create object of class A and then trying to access, then what happens?
If you are trying to access of created a object of class A and trying to access B based on the reference of class A, then A data method.
No, so A, let's say I'm going to create object
Mhm.
uh,
Of
with a name A. So reference of A, but actually the object of B.
yeah. Then the B data will be called here.
Yeah, B data will be called. And if you're trying to access with A, then A data will be called, correct?
Mm, yeah.
So my question is that overriding when we are using that variable? So is that variable is also get overridden or not?
No, variable will not be get overridden. Only method will be overridden. Method will
Only method will be overridden.
yeah.
Are you sure if we are using the method, okay,
Mhm.
and using the value to print A. So if we are calling from B, it's going to print B value, and if we are calling to A, it's going to print A value, correct? It not get
Yeah.
overwritten,
Not it.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Just share your screen and write it few logic.
Okay. Just a minute.